Hey, hey, JD, welcome back. Monday Matters.
Monday Matters.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Looking forward to picking back up here in James
Picking back
chapter
up.
2. Yeah, I've been loving the series.
Hey, would you like to read for us?
Sure, absolutely. James chapter 2, verses 8. If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You're doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become accountable for all of it. For he who said, "Do not commit adultery," also said, "Do not murder." If you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so act as those who are judged under the law of liberty. For judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Ooh, I love that. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Oh, mic drop. What do you think of that passage so far?
It's hard. It's hard. I mean, it's talking about the law, and so the idea that if I break one law, I'm actually guilty of breaking all of them. That's kind of a difficult. How do you? Because everyone's going to break a law, and I know. But you're guilty. It's not that you're guilty of breaking all the laws, but you're as guilty as if you had broken all the laws, and so that's pretty tough stuff.
But it's so important, right? Like I think it's something that Jesus focused on, that John the Baptist focused on time and time again, and still. And I think this goes even beyond the Christian religion. All religious people for thousands of years, we all think that we're good people. Because Jesus, when he goes about preaching, the first word he says, repent, which is you got to have something to repent for. Like, you suck. You're a sinner. But time and time again, we get in our heads, hey, we've been behaving. We're good people.
Yeah.
We know the truth. We're right. And there's always sort of this separation between holy and not, sinners and saints. But according to this, you break one part of the law, you've broken all of it. So
and so
you're down there, buddy.
We tend to rank the breaking. So murder is pretty bad in our, in our scale. Adultery is bad, but it's not quite as bad as murder. Theft is probably maybe not quite as bad as adultery. I mean, so we kind of rank it. And
one stuff like greed isn't bad at all. Or at least it's not seen as super, super bad.
But it is sin, right?
Oh, it's a huge sin. We were just talking about that, our last thing. But in our culture, greed, that's nowhere near as bad as murder.
Wow. Yeah. So guilty is guilty, right?
Guilty is guilty. And this passage really makes me think of where Jesus is, I think it's in Matthew, I'm not sure, where he says, you have heard it said, do not commit adultery. But I say, if you lust, you are guilty of committing adultery. Yeah. You've heard it say, do not murder. But if you say raka, fool, you're guilty of the same. I'm guilty of that. I've lusted. I've called people much worse than fool in my life. And pretty regularly. It's not even just like a one-time thing. I think Jesus' whole point, as well as the point of James here, you break the law constantly, and not just one part, like you break all of it. I think it's this attempt to humble us that we are sinners. Yeah. Because once we get to that humble point where we realize we're sinners and finally admit to it, then mercy triumphs over judgment.
Yeah, that second part then kicks in because, yes, you're guilty. So I'll think about being angry with somebody is equated to murder. And I can kind of see it because, you get it in your head. You're really, I mean, you're not just angry at somebody. You're like irate, angry at somebody. And then pretty soon you're starting to formulate, here's what I would do if I had the opportunity. Yeah. And the next thing you know, they're murderous thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, they're everything but. And then you have to kind of pull it back. And I don't know if you ever do that. But it's easy to go there. And so Jesus is saying, yes, that's the same deal.
Yeah. And not even just getting, but even just that inclination towards anger, vindication, revenge.
Yeah. In your anger, don't sin. Whoa.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
How do you do that when Jesus says, calling someone fool is a sin? Lusting, something totally internal in your brain, can be a sin too.
Yep.
It's almost like we're all sinners.
It's almost.
We are.
Almost like, right?
No,
But-
we are.
but-
That's I think what Jesus and James are trying to constantly say over and over again. We are sinners. And that's also why this passage really brings up for me where Jesus is talking about the woman where all the disciples are snubbing their nose at. But he says, I think this is the place where he says, he who has been forgiven much loves much.
Yeah.
We need to realize just how bad of sinners we are.
Yeah.
We need to think that we're such terrible people because it will actually help us love God more and be thankful for forgiveness more. But if we don't need mercy, then what's the point?
Yeah, so let's move to that part of that because that's so powerful. There will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others. So if I can't put myself in somebody else's shoes and understand the fact that they're sinful, but I'm also sinful.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm sinful like I accept that and I'm good with that. But more, wow, I understand, and I have to show mercy and feel mercy and grant mercy because it's the more you give, the more you receive in terms of mercy. So it's Jesus talked about it's pressed down and shaken down, pressed together, and
part of mercy is not, at least in this context. Earlier in the passage it says, if you show partiality, you are committing sin. I think part of showing mercy, and this is hard, part of showing true mercy means not thinking you're better than the other person. Like, so say someone's harmed you, right? Like, wow, I never would have done that, but I'll forgive you. That's okay. That's not really mercy. True mercy is like, I sin all the time too. It's okay. Versus thinking like, hey, I'm going to forgive you, but I would never do what you did. That's not true mercy. At least it seems like in the context of this passage, not showing partiality, because we are also convicted by the law as transgressors, which is hard to do, right? It's hard to forgive. I don't know. Have you ever been in an argument before and gotten an apology, but it seemed like a really, I don't know if
a fake apology.
Fake apology.
Yeah,
or
I'm sorry I hurt your. I'm sorry if that hurt.
Feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Sorry if that hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not an apology.
It's not. No, because a true apology or even true forgiveness, the same kind of thing, it has to be on an equal playing field.
Yeah. So the ability to look at it and say, okay, I understand, where you're coming from, or I understand. You might not understand why they did something, but I understand what it is to hurt and to be angry and to lash out, or I understand what it's like to, whatever it is. There's got to be a way to place yourself in the other person's shoes somehow. I understand what it's like to need forgiveness.
I may not have murdered someone like you did, but I understand what it's like to be angry, at someone.
Murder them in your mind or with your words.
Yeah.
Fool.
Lash out. Yeah.
Raka.
And that's something I think it's also important to make the distinction. In God's law, those sins are the same. You've broken those sins. But in our world, as well as us as leaders of the church, we're held to a different standard. And we've talked about this a lot. There's a difference between a level 1 sin and a level 30 sin. Whereas the level 1 sin is angry, fantasize about the anger and plotting revenge, actually plotting revenge, going and killing someone. There's the different levels of where it harms someone else.
Right.
And so there's a difference in the way that sin impacts people in this world, but in God's eyes, it's the same. So we need to stay humble because we sin just as much as everybody else. But that we need to do our best as Christ followers to limit our sin to just those first level sins so that we're still as convicted, but not letting it harm those around us, those that we love, as much as possible.
Yeah, limit it. Not meaning I'm good with it as long as I keep it at a level 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But instead, catching it before it moves to level 5, 6, 7. And then giving it to God when I'm like, wow, I realize this is where my mind is going, it's where my heart's going, it's where my emotions are taking me. And that's hard to do, but it is, but catching it at that level will help us be merciful in other people's lives too, because we see that they didn't catch it sometimes, or there've been times I didn't catch it until it was level 30, and the next thing you know.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, great stuff. Wow. If you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. Man, that in itself makes me want to be more merciful than anything. I mean, I totally mean it. I want to grant so much mercy and forgiveness and grace to people because I know that's what I want. That's the way I want God to look at me and say, you've forgiven a lot, and so I forgive you a lot. And I can't get there. I mean, as much as I even need. So it's an amazing thing. But that,
it goes to show how important forgiveness and mercy are. We should be praying about this kind of stuff every day.
Yeah.
God, help me to show mercy to people. To these people that harmed me, help me to show forgiveness. Because we get to those pearly gates. We're sitting in front of the throne of judgment. I do not want to be the person that judged other people too hard.
Right.
At all, because I know I have so much that needs forgiveness for.
And it's really easy as Christ followers to get to the place where we feel like, well, we kind of have this figured out, and we're right and you're wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Hard, but really good too.
Anything else you would pull from this part of the passage, or do you think we should finish chapter 2 right now?
Let's try to finish it.
Okay. Do you want to read, or do you want me to?
I'll go. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye and have a good day. Stay warm and eat well. But then you don't give that person food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. It is dead and useless. I don't know, now it goes on just a little bit further. Now someone may argue, some people have faith, others have good deeds. But I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have good deeds? I will show you my faith by my good deeds. There's a lot there.
It's a lot of good stuff.
There's a lot of good stuff, yeah. What do you think? Anything you want to comment on?
Yeah, I think as rough as James can be, we have to be very intentional that our works don't save us, but they are the indication of what's going on in our hearts. Okay. And so it's not by works that we're saved, but if our hearts are truly changed, if we truly do have faith, we cannot help but have good works, if that makes sense. So a great test of your faith, if you think you have faith, look at the works of your life. I just love it because I'm constantly convicted by this. I'm constantly trying to analyze myself and being convicted, knowing I need to do more. Because as someone who's, loves theology, loves reading the Bible, studied all this stuff, none of it matters if we're not acting it out.
If we're not practicing.
We're not practicing it. Like it's the proof is in the pudding. It's not in how good your systematic theology is. It's in, are you clothing the people that need clothed in your community? Are you giving food to the people that need food? Are you acting out your faith? Which is just so convicting, but it's also so encouraging because this right here is more than religion. Religion is, we know it's right. We're going to show up, do these, liturgical service. I'm talking all religions. I'm talking Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, religion traditionally. This is just so much more. This is a way of life. This is a way of self-sacrifice, of that agape, self-sacrificial love. So I love it. I wouldn't even call it a standard because it's not a standard we live to gain salvation. But it's like, this is what it should look like if you truly have the Holy Spirit within you. And so I'm not there, constantly working, trying to get there.
Right.
But I love it, that this is what it looks like to have a relationship with Jesus, because that's what I want. I want my life to be changed. And so this is what we're working towards.
Yeah. So I like what you said. This is, religion, any religion, and not all religions are equal, but religion is almost all in your head.
Yeah.
It's almost like, here's my understanding of God. Here's my understanding of creation. Here's my understanding of, sanctification or salvation, whatever. But that's all, and it's important. Our religion is important, but Well, actually, James goes into religion here in a little bit too, but that's in the head, but the action tells us whether the religion has sunk into your heart.
Yeah.
Has it moved your hands? Has it caused you to?
And I would say not even religion. What if it's not even the head that's causing the action? What if it's this relationship, this new kind of relationship with God that Jesus taught us about, that it wasn't about the head knowledge at all. It was about inviting God into our hearts, into this life-transforming relationship, which just changes everything. Because I'm thinking right now of the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Where this guy gets robbed and he's almost dead on the side of the road. And all these religious people walk right by him.
Right.
And then Jesus chooses the Samaritan, which is honestly a different religion than the Jewish people at the time, because they thought, I think one of the biggest differences is they thought it wasn't Mount Sinai. They had a different holy mountain, right? Am I butchering this? What was
no? They had a different. They worshipped and they offered sacrifices. One in the temple, and then the Samaritans offered sacrifices on a mountain,
which is like a completely different religion.
Except
they hated each other.
They hated each other, and Jews considered Samaritans dogs because they were half bloods. They weren't full bloods,
which is crazy, right? And that goes right along with this. Well, guess what, guys? It's about what you do. And Jesus said the exact same thing. That Samaritan man is the one that's holy in God's eyes because he actually did something. What was up here didn't matter. He acted out this life-transforming faith that's a result of our relationship with Christ. And so I just know I'm constantly convicted by this. I try to ask myself this question: How have I clothed those who need clothing? Helped the poor. How have I done these things in my life this week? And some weeks I do a lot better than other weeks.
Yeah.
I think we have to be strategic, though. Can you tell me a little bit about what it means to be strategic about helping the poor, especially in a place here like Walla Walla, where we actually do have a ton of great organizations helping the poor?
Right.
Does this mean go out and immediately give all money to panhandlers? How do we be strategic without using strategy as an excuse for inaction?
That's a lot of questions.
Sorry, I know I really loaded that. But what does it mean? So how do we actually do this? Does this mean we just go out and literally start handing out dollar bills to panhandlers?
So it's really easy to find somebody laying in a doorway at night in Walla Walla. Now, not compared to Tacoma or some of these bigger cities where there's people living all over the place, but it doesn't really help them. Sometimes our helping is actually harmful. When you go up and you hand them a $5 bill or whatever and think, hey, I've done my part. Actually, no. We as a church, we support the Christian Aid Center.
Yeah.
And that's a portion of like, if you give $1 to the church, a portion of that dollar ends up at Christian Aid Center because they actually have people on the ground who are walking these homeless people toward re-entering society and setting aside addictions and figuring out how to get a job and keep a job, and it's a long-term help. And even beyond that, they also offer meals and stuff like that. So I would say it's very important to be careful how you help, because sometimes our helping isn't helpful.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that doesn't mean that we always get a pass.
No. Sometimes it does mean giving, not going through an organization, but going out of your way to do it yourself too.
Yeah. But I think it's really hard. Someone, oftentimes they'll have a little passage, somebody will say, need help, and then they'll have a certain passage, that basically tugs at the heartstrings of a Christian, like, hey, you owe me money kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's... when I see that, I always drive on.
Yeah.
Because I'm like manipulator.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
I know at Skyrocket, we have the food bank
yes.
every other week, which has been really good. We also have clothing that's completely free to anyone in the community that needs it, as well as food at the church if anyone needs food. So if you're watching this and you're in Prescott, please let us know if you need food or clothing. One thing, though, that I want to point out that I haven't really realized until actually reading this through this time is it says, if a brother or sister.
Yeah.
When that phrase is normally said here in the New Testament, it's referring to people within the church.
Correct.
And I think that that's intentional.
Yes.
about, yes, we're supposed to take care of those within our community, but especially,
Right.
I think there's a case to be made here that this is talking particularly about those within our family, our church family, our congregation. Because if anything, is that not the greatest testimony to the world, to those outside of the church, of what the love of Christ looks like? If we as a church, earlier in this chapter 2, it's talking about rich and poor are equal within the walls of the church. We're not showing partiality, so we welcome all those who are poor, and then we take care of each other. That is a witness to Jesus. I feel like if we as a church did our job with that, wow, people would be flocking. They would be banging down the doors to get in.
I think it's totally true. So let me kind of describe what our system is. At Blue Mountain, we have, a portion of what we have goes to Christian Aid Center and various other ministries. But then we also have, a benevolence fund. And the idea there is if somebody has need and we can help, we'll try to listen to the need and determine how can we help. But if you're a member of the church and you have a need, we'll help you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like
no matter what.
Yeah. Well, no matter what. I'm struggling with rent. Well, how can we help you get where you? And we might even try to find you a place. I mean, we'll we've given away cars. We've that kind of we're going to go the extra mile because that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I know this isn't even I know that as a staff, I know Blue Mountain, there's a process for that. It's also ingrained into the culture here. So I know and I'm not going to name names, after my grandfather passed away 2-3 months ago, we're in a small group with several members here at Blue Mountain. Hey, how can we bring food? How can we help take care of your grandma? Does she need someone to stay with her? That's what it looks like to be the church, to do this thing where someone who's, and I know it says the poor and those that need clothing, but also in, James, it talks about widows, orphans. To me, I was like, that's what this is talking about, is taking care of those in the church. And so that's truly what it means. At Skyrocket, we recently started a meal train, for someone who needed help. Stuff like that. That's what it means to be a part of Blue Mountain Community Church and Skyrocket Church. Is we take care of those who are within our walls, like you said, with everything.
So culturally speaking, if you needed clothing back then, that was like your most expensive thing. It was clothing. I mean, that's, for us, it might be a car or your house, but for them, it was, your clothing was it. And so that's not true today. You might give somebody a pair of shoes, and then the next day they're laying out in a mud puddle or something like that because they're going to get another pair of shoes from someone else. 'Cause, our shoes are almost, our clothing in some ways is almost disposable.
Yeah.
So I think translate this into our culture. What is that need? I mean, it might not be clothes. It might be something that is bigger, probably housing. Or something.
And that's
like
a hard one to ask. Because I know at Skyrocket, we've had several requests, although not from within the church, but we've had several requests for housing. Don't even know where to start because there's no houses even to rent.
Yeah.
So that's a hard one. I feel like we have our work cut out for us trying to figure that out.
So the other thought I had that you mentioned, if you're in a group, like you're in a certain group. If you're in a group, you've got people around you who you're sharing life deeply with. And if you're willing to say, hey, I have a need, almost always that group will rally around you. And me sitting in my pastor office over here, I'll never know about it because your group loves you so much that they're going to take care of that issue.
Yep.
Because that's the church. That's what it looks like.
That is the church, and it goes to show too that church is more than just Sundays. I'm thinking of our group too. I know one of our small group at Skyrocket, because I talked about the group here, but Megan and I are also in a small group at Skyrocket. 100% that one of the members of our group was going through something, and 3 or 4 different members of that small group pitched in to help them with things throughout the week. It's like, this is what church is. Yeah. This is what it talks about here in James, what being the church is. And I know you and I, when we hear stories like that, or when we get to participate in that, I don't know about you, it just makes me so happy. It's like, this is it. It's so exciting.
Yeah. So people who are living deeply with other Christians, and I mean more than just Sunday morning. And I'm glad if you come on Sunday morning, I'm really glad, and that's great. But there's a deeper level, and that people who are living on that deeper level in a connection in a community, whether it be a small group or a men's Bible study or women's, whatever. Those people have support and And that just makes a huge difference. So not only do they have support, they have the opportunity to give support.
Yep.
It's a tremendous thing. And so oftentimes, like if somebody's in, they're in the hospital and I get word like later on, so-and-so was in the hospital. And usually I like to go visit people in the hospital if they're in the hospital. But I get word later, but their group was there and, they said someone there.
They know immediately because they're talking to each other throughout the week,
It's great.
So yeah, Sunday morning is like opening the door and walking in that first step.
Yeah.
We want you to come in, sit down around the table. We want you to come sit around in the family room. So yeah, we love it that you're here the first step, but having that backing, that safety net a lot of times is small groups. And so I know it was really cool, small groups rooted, happening here at Blue Mountain Community Church, as well as we call ours the Circle on Thursday nights at Skyrocket. There's a lot of opportunities for those small groups to happen, here at Blue Mountain as well as at Skyrocket.
Absolutely. And typically, a church does small groups because that's kind of taken the place of, it used to be Sunday school classes.
Yeah.
And Sunday school classes worked great for a long time. But now, you're in the group model. But yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
We're going to wrap that up. We didn't make it all the way through James chapter 2, but I'm really excited for the next because the next sentence in James, the next verse in James is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. So I can't wait for us to talk.
Yeah, I wonder what that
cannot wait
is.
for the next.
All right. Very good.
For the next
Thanks, everybody.
part.
We'll catch you next week.
Monday Matters.
Monday Matters.